Good morning, and welcome to the part 2 of our 4-part series that the Sales and Marketing Council puts on of our summer educational learning opportunities. I am Taylor Lyles, Executive Vice President of your Home Builders Association of Greenville, and I would like to first be the one to say thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. Our first series was Mortgage 101 with Amanda McCall, and the response was absolutely incredible. And we're excited to be able to offer you home inspections with Dave Adams today of ProTech Inspections. We're going to roll into a couple of different things. I just wanted to touch on a few housekeeping items. If you are using your computer, below in that question and answer box, please get in any questions. This is a great opportunity to ask, to learn. If you've got anything you want to know, we're here to answer it today, and I know Dave will do the best that he possibly can to get you the right answers, because I'm not. I can't. But I would like to first, from my point, say, Dave, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you taking your time out as well. A couple of things that I'd like to highlight are, through the HBA, we do have other events going on. We have a clay tournament coming up. That is our annual clay tournament, September the 11th at the Clinton House. Registration is open for that. And October 1st, golf tournament. We're excited to be able to put it back on. It will be out at Willow Creek, and we'll be able to all of our registrations are open right now for that as well. So if you'd like to sponsor a hole, if you would like to play, or if you just like to donate to the association, we will definitely take that as well. But I know y'all didn't come here to hear me talk. I'm going to turn it over to Trina, who is our current 2020 chair of the Sales and Marketing Council. Trina, good morning. Hang on 2 seconds, Trina. You're going to have to unmute yourself. Try it one more time.
Unmute.
There we
good?
go.
Okay. Gotta love technology. So again, my name is Trina Montalbano. I'm the chair of the Sales and Marketing Council in this fun year of 2020 and all this fun digital stuff. So, thank you again for just taking the time out of your morning to join us. What our motto with the Sales and Marketing Council is: learn more, earn more. And so that's what we are trying to do along with the Professional Women in Building. We've come together to bring this summer series of events. Like Taylor said, we had our first one, which was phenomenal. Obviously, today is day number 2 with Dave Adams with ProTech. Our next one is with Don Curry. It's Appraisal 101, and you're going to have some really interesting questions for him as well. And then we will have a grand finale. Details to come. We're just still finalizing some stuff, but those of you who watch HGTV, I think you'll be very interested. But again, we are here to bring value to our members, and if you've got questions just about the Sales and Marketing Council, please let myself or Taylor know. But again, just thank you for taking the time to be here this morning. I'm very excited to introduce Dave Adams with ProTech, and I'll stop talking now and turn it over to Dave. Welcome, Dave.
Good morning, Trina. Thank you guys for having us. So I was told 30 or 45 minutes, and there's really no way to cover home inspections and how they relate to new construction in that period of time. So we're going to move through this as quickly as we can. And there's some things at the end that I feel are really important for all of us. So basically what we're going to talk about today is the introduction here, and then what is a home inspection? Because I think there's a lot of common misunderstandings about what it is that we do, where our standards of practice come from. So when you get that report from a client and it's 40 pages, why is that? Best practices, and then we have an internal program that we use called a code program, and that name is by design, and then we'll open it up for questions. So a little about myself. I started this company in 2016. Currently we have 6 licensed inspectors, and we're still booked out 10 days. We really struggle trying to keep up with the current demand, just like I know most of you guys are doing the same thing, especially your on-site folks trying to find subs. We do about 1,700 to 2,000 inspections annually. and we're currently in the process of expanding to Rock Hill, Charleston, and Myrtle Beach. One of the things that I think is important for you to understand is not only are we licensed home inspectors, but all my folks are also licensed realtors. And we don't practice real estate in terms of buying or selling, but we use it to get in super boxes. So at the time, it was a differentiator, and now GGAR has kind of changed their approach to that. But let's talk about what is a home inspection. So the main thing that a lot of people don't understand about a home inspection is it is a visual inspection of the systems and the major accessible components. That's probably the hardest thing that we have to communicate to folks is we can't see behind walls. We can't see in a slab. And you would think that would be, pretty well understood, but it inevitably causes problems because they're like, well, why are we, we're paying a nice chunk of money and you're only going to look at the stuff you can see. And at the end of the day, the stuff that we can see is kind of taking the clues and building a context around what those clues are to what we believe is going on. And, I often tell folks if we're wrong, we're wrong. I don't mind owning that. But sometimes the best thing we can be is wrong. So what we're trying to do really is paint a picture for our client on what the true condition of that home is. And it's important for the client to understand that condition can change. Not so much in terms of you guys, but, for the general homeowner, they're going to quit taking care of it. Their sense of ownership a lot of times is gone. Professional associations, there's two main ones, InterNACHI, NACHI.org, and then the American Society of Home Inspectors. They've been around much longer, and that's also where the standards of practice for the state of South Carolina comes from. Let me also kind of pause at this moment to tell you I'll be more than happy to share this slide deck with Taylor when we're done so that he can distribute it to you guys so you can take advantage of the links. And also, as we go through the systems and things we look at, there's just simply, a lot of things we won't be able to touch on in detail. So I'll share the slide deck, and then you're more than welcome to follow up with me offline if you have questions. So standards of practice, again, this is taken directly from the state standards. The state standards are adopted by the Residential Builders Commission, or the LLR, which is who we're also licensed through. Inspect readily accessible, visually observable, installed systems and components. And that's really key throughout all the different areas of the home that we're going to talk about. There are basic standards that we have to meet. So when you see that 40-page report, it's not that we're sitting there just trying to have as many pages as we can. In fact, we try to limit and have as few as we can. But there's items, whether good or bad, that we have to report on. And what we're reporting on is their functionality, if there's any defects, if there's anything unsafe, and then recommendations to correct. Now, it's important for you guys to understand we do not tell them or give them ideas on how to fix it. We all know that, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and there could be 10 different ways to fix the same thing. So we purposely leave that open-ended and just say something like recommend repair. Reasoning or explanation as to why the deficiency is reported. So, if it's a two-story house and we see a ceiling stain, then, what we would probably say is, possible leak or potential leak. We can't see it to tell, but we're going to use the clues that we see to suggest what we think it might be. And then we're only going to look at those items that are required to look at. And we'll start talking about those now. However, this is where it comes into it. Even though we have a standards of practice, sometimes we're going to exceed it. And the best example that I can give you there is we use actual circuit analyzers rather than the the simple $8 plug-in GFCI testers like the county uses or most inspectors. So if we see a voltage drop, we may report that. And those are things we do to try to drive value to our clients. If there's a system that we are not required to inspect, we're probably not going to inspect it. And the reason I say that is a great example is irrigation systems. They, we've gone to houses that had brown yards and you could tell they hadn't watered it in 10 years, but the minute you turn it on and it leaks, it's your fault. So we're very careful, especially with water. If we go into a home and you have a shutoff valve to a toilet or a sink turned off, or you have the gas turned off to a gas appliance, we're not going to turn it on because we don't know why that item is turned off. All right, so on the exterior, and I'm going to just run down through real quick the items we look at again, because I think there's a piece of this at the end that we can all learn from. That's really probably the most important part we're going to talk about today. We're at the exterior of the house. We're going to just do a walk around the perimeter. We're going to look at the eave soffit fascia, the exterior cladding. We're going to, if it's a slab, which of course most are nowadays, we're going to look at the exterior perimeter of the slab, and then we're going to look at decks. One of the things that we tell folks a lot of times is, especially with production builders, a lot of these guys aren't licensed contractors, they're project managers. So what it boils down to is how closely that project manager manages their subs. And we can see that going in different neighborhoods. We can tell the project managers that are really on top of it and do a great job. And it's always nice to be able to tell our clients that in advance. And that's part of setting expectations. But decks are where we normally find a lot of deficiencies, missing lag bolts, missing flashings, those kinds of things. Vegetation's not normally an issue with new construction, but a lot of times the grading and surface drainage is probably one of the most common defects we find with new homes is the 6 to 8 inches of clearance between the exterior cladding and the ground. It's just simply not graded down enough so that when they lay the sod, then you end up with that cladding or siding too close to the ground. The roof. Our company policy is we don't get on 2-story roofs. Part of that's because neither the workers' comp nor my general liability or E&O insurance will cover if we fall from a height of greater than 15 foot. So if it's a single-story roof, my inspectors are required to get on it. If it's a 2-story roof, if we can enter or get on the roof through a 2nd-story window, then we'll look at that first floor part and any hips or valleys that we can see. But we're not going to get on a 2-story roof. We're going to look at the roof materials. Most common with new construction, again, is usually there's a lot of nails or there's exposed nails where the roofers didn't caulk at the shingle. And then here lately, we've been seeing a lot of flashing defects at the sidewall. Yesterday, we had a new construction we did in TR, and it's a metal roof, and there was absolutely no sidewall flashings, and you could see the house wrap. So I'm not exactly sure how it's not leaking already. But we have to describe those materials and the methods that we use to inspect the roof. And it's important to understand that the standards of practice do not require us to get on a roof at all. The structure, typically not an issue with new construction, but if it's on a crawl space, one of the issues we see sometimes is the girder spacing. And we'll pull up, we don't inspect the code, but we'll pull up code to see what spacing's allowed based on the different aspects of the home in terms of, the dimension of the lumber and, is it floor joist or is it beams or what's the materials that it's being built with. We do not move insulation, so that's important to understand. There's things that we just simply will not do, and sometimes it covers up defects, but that's primarily on older homes. Again, on that new house we did yesterday, in the crawl space, the moisture reading was over 20%. So, make sure the vents are open on your crawl space walls if you're building on a crawl. Insulation, we're going to make sure there's a vapor barrier there. We're going to make sure that it's not damaged. and then attics and those areas, you know, a lot of times we'll see a ridge vent that's not properly cut out at the OSB. The area is just simply too narrow. And then we're going to look at the vent pipes, the exhaust systems that go through the attic. Clothes dryer exhaust systems. On that new construction yesterday, most of you probably know this, it's got to be 12 inches off the ground, and the exterior cover on this one was basically touching the ground. So, you know, and they had a CO. So those are things that we're looking at. And we're also looking at the absence of insulation. I did one myself earlier this year, and there was not the first bit of insulation in the attic. So, you know, those things get overlooked, and we try to explain those to the client. And again, at the end, we'll talk about that. The interior, I get a lot of phone calls from builders fussing about the way that we report on the interior. Typically, it's things related to caulking, damages to doors and walls, cosmetic things, and we explain that to the client. But the approach that we take is, you know, we're there for a couple of hours, and when that client moves in, they're there all the time. So by reporting on these small things that they would probably typically mark in their blue tape walk, it shows them that we did pay attention. It helps build value for us. And again, it's a new house, so they have a certain level of expectations about what they're buying. And you know, we're an advocate for them. We're working for that client. So we just want to report those things, not to be obstinate or critical of you guys, but, you know, just to do a good job for our client. A lot of times when we go to new instruction at the interior, sometimes the gas won't be on or the gas fireplace won't be fully installed. Pardon me. And we'll mention that and tell them to have you prove to them that it works. And what we typically see there is just, you know, your on-site guy will go in, take a video of it working, and get it over to their realtor, and that typically satisfies them. Heating. We do not test heat systems in the summer or cooling systems in the winter. And the reason for that is manufacturer specifications regarding temperatures of 65 or greater. It's just too easy for us to be held accountable if something gets damaged. And the other thing that we see on new construction is a lot of times the startup process hasn't been done. So my inspectors are trained, if that thermostat is not on, then we assume startup process has not been done. And, you know, if we can't inspect major components such as the HVAC, it severely decreases the value to our clients. And, you know, it's not our fault. And there's a reason that we're typically there anyway. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But, you know, just help us out by making sure that the startup has been done and we can test those components. Cooling, same thing. You know, in the attic, we're going to look, and we are looking for clearance around vent pipes on gas furnaces. We're looking for caulking and sealing at the exterior, the insulation at the refrigerant lines. We're looking for temperature differentials. And a lot of times if we find a problem with the temperature differentials, it can be traced back to the dampers in the split zone system. So those are all things we consider in what we report on. Now you'll see there that it says the inspector shall open readily openable access panels. And what that means is we don't have to use a tool. So 9 times out of 10, and probably actually more than that, we're not going to open access panels. You know, there's just no good can come from that for us. And, you know, a lot of times, especially on gas furnaces, there'll be construction dust in there. And we will recommend, we can see that through the holes and ventilation area. So we'll recommend that be cleaned. Fireplaces, we don't like pilot lights. A lot of them nowadays are your heat glow systems, and we just hit a switch and it turns on. And, you know, sometimes the gas lines haven't been primed, so we'll have to turn it on 2 or 3 times. and we don't mind doing that. But, just make sure that, before we get there, that these systems work. It's just a great way to impress your client, really, or your buyer. Electrical. Most inspectors don't know code. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but we are looking for things like GFCI at the washer that's now required. We're testing AFC outlets. The circuit analyzers we use will test the AFCI and give us a response time. Same thing for GFCIs. We're opening the panels up. Typically not a big issue with new construction, but from time to time we will see multiple ground connectors on the same connection. Used to be a very common thing in older homes, but not so much anymore. But we have to tell the clients what amperage of service they have at the home, where the main disconnects are, if there's any sub panels. And the big thing is smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms. Are they present? If there's any gas appliance in the house. And of course, a lot of people don't understand in most new construction, the CO and smoke detectors are the same, in a lot of cases, the same device. The other thing that we're very careful on the electrical is we try to go over AFCI and where they reset in the panels and explain that to the client so that they understand it, because we get phone calls about it. So I'm sure your warranty guys do as well. Plumbing, again, in today's modern construction, a lot of this stuff is hidden. So we're looking at traps under sinks. We're evaluating if it has functional drainage. We're testing water temperatures. And then looking for vent pipes. Some of the builders have gone to passive ventilation in the attic, and they're sealing the top of the roof. So we're looking to make sure there's at least one vent pipe going through the roof. We're also looking at fuel storage and fuel distribution. So the main issue we're looking for there is if it's a gas water heater, is it 18 inches off the ground? Is there a bollard in front of it to protect it? Or is it in some type of recessed area for protection? Sewage ejectors, a few of the properties we've seen have had macerator pumps in there. So as we flush toilets and all, we're going to check that. We're going to look at sump pumps if they're in. Just a lot of different things. We just want to make sure the stuff works. And we do actually feel the drain pipes, or the traps rather, so that we can, make sure there's no leaks. Because a lot of time your plumber will come in there and, he did something on Friday and he almost got done, and he just comes back on Monday to finish up, and, they're in a hurry to get on to the next job. So we just check those things. I see some questions popping up. I'll get to those at the end, if that's okay. Best practices. So I mentioned that we do not inspect the code. We inspect the best practices. And I put the definition in there of what the dictionary says. And basically just research and experience shows that it's the right thing. And we all know that sometimes best practices don't meet code. So we're going to get in and talk about that a little bit. Before I do that, though, probably the number one thing that I've done to upset builders is refuse to inspect a home. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. First and foremost, again, we're all about adding value to the client. If we go into a house and the gas isn't hooked up, the appliances aren't put in, the water's not turned on, there's no value to that. But here's the other approach that I take, and that is it also makes the house look bad. And I don't think any of you set out to build a bad house. So there's a fine line between giving the client value, but also working in favor of you, the seller, because we're an unbiased third party. We don't want to send them a report where everything is marked as repair, replace, because it looks like to them you haven't done what you were supposed to do. And builders get very aggravated with us with that on us, but it's as much to protect you and make the house look better for your benefit. You know, one of the things I tell people is, look, if you want to like your house when you move in it, stay away while they're building it. Because if you're over there every day, you're going to hate your house. And the reason for that is people don't understand how we build houses. You know, it's not always a clear-cut process, and it's messy and ugly sometimes. And you know what? That's okay. But the typical consumer does not understand that. So, you know, if we refuse to inspect it, I would love if builders would understand it's as much for them as it is for the client, because we're limited on time slots, and we're basically giving up revenue by refusing to inspect it because we got to move it to another day. But it's for everyone's benefit. Reports delivered to the client and buyer's agent. You know, a lot of the builders, we have to provide a license and insurance info, which we're happy to do, and then we have to sign a third-party inspector agreement. And that agreement typically gives us permission to send you the report. However, the code of ethics for home inspectors and the state law regarding confidentiality of our reports prevent us from doing that. So even though we have an agreement with you guys that we're not going to violate our code of ethics or state law to send that to you. We're going to send it to the client and the buyer's agent if they have one. And we're going to tell them that they need to provide that to you. So just a little, insight there on why we do that. This is probably the biggest opportunity that I see for us today. Internally, we have what's called a code program. We don't inspect a code, and we don't mention this to clients, but this is what we do internally. And it's again, best practices, things that we've identified that we can do to make this process smoother for our clients. So the first thing we try to focus on is communication. The clients are told, let us be the bad guy. And what that typically looks like is we'll tell that client, look, people naturally want to help other people. Your builder's overwhelmed building, multiple houses. If there's something wrong, let us be the bad guy. Let us give them the bad news. Let us talk to your builder. Let us work with them. And it's kind of a multi-pronged approach there because we understand the process. And you don't need the client all up in your business every day. Then there's always opportunities. How do we report defects, deficiencies, and experience? And I put over there on the right side the new construction packages that we offer. So, that'll kind of give you an idea of what we do with clients. So the biggest issue that we have on new construction is communication between us and the builder. And I say builder, but a lot of times it boils down to the on-site sales agents. We understand things are going to be changed and, subs can't get there when they're supposed to, or windows don't show up when they were supposed to. We understand that. So we understand we're going to have to change our schedule when it's related to new construction projects. But we would love to have a heads up. We want to be an asset and make the experience better for everybody. We're not looking to make the builder's life difficult. Just help us, help you, and help the buyer by communicating with us. The opportunity. So I think this is the single biggest takeaway for home builders today. When clients call us, it's an opportunity for us, but the biggest opportunity is actually for you. So the conversation always begins with, I'm getting a new house built and, I'm just not happy. So there's typically 4 reasons why people call us. They lack the knowledge to know what to look for. They just don't have the time to fool with it. And even though they say they don't have the time to fool with it, they're out there at your job site every day. They live out of town, but 95% of the time, it's a lack of trust. Something has happened between them and their salesperson, them and their realtor and the salesperson, or them and the on-site super, that they've lost trust. So it's important to understand what we are being told when we get these calls. typically the salesperson immediately tries to talk them out of having a third-party inspector. Well, they already have lost trust for some reason. So when the builder sales rep says county inspectors and we have our own building inspectors, that pushes them away even further. I will tell you, for new construction, the best salesperson on my team is a lot of these on-site sales agents. And look, I'm not criticizing them because they're doing their job and I understand why they do it. So I'm not putting them down. Please, please don't take it that way. But then after they have that conversation, they'll say, well, you know, they're going to have to send us their insurance and their license stuff, and then they're going to have to sign a document. So as they're discussing all these things, it's how they're saying them. And by the time they call us, you know, I could charge twice what we do because they're so ready to have their own inspector. So I think that's a real opportunity for builders to improve the relationship and experience with their clients. And I put a thing over here on the side. Some of you've probably seen it. Why do customers quit? And, you know, 68% quit because of an attitude of indifference towards the customer by some employee. You know, and it doesn't take but just a minute to make somebody feel like you care. It's all in the words that you choose and how you say things. So defects and deficiencies. You know, I tell people, look, there's going to be problems with a home. They're built by people, and there's not a perfect one around. So some of the things that we try to do, the process and the speed of the build, we explain to people that at the very beginning, it's going to seem like you're just throwing that house together because as you're doing the framing, everything comes together real quick. But the real art of home building and the real time comes in once you start doing the interior. So we prepare them for that first big rush of seeing the home grow up, and then we prepare them for what seems like a big slowdown. Documentation. So a lot of the local builders on slabs have stopped using mesh in the slab. So we go ahead and talk to the client about it being in the seismic region, and they're not required to do that. But typically the county may require an engineer's letter on file dictating that the design is proper for this seismic region. We also talk to them about broken trusses, you know, and how as trusses are lifted up, they're often broken, and the proper way to repair cistern a board to it. So we prepare them for those things up front. Again, no recommendations on how to repair. And then we also talk about common items. One of the other big things they say when they call is, man, there's a huge crack in my concrete slab. So we go ahead and have the discussion about concrete is going to crack regardless of age. It's part of the drying and curing process. So we work to try to eliminate some of those questions and concerns before we ever show up at the house. And then we're setting that expectation and building upon that the entire way through so that you aren't getting hit with the same questions over and over. And then, you know, the other thing we'll tell them is, hey, we'll take a Sharpie and measure it and take some pictures and come back in a few weeks. Is the Sharpie mark the area where you take the picture so you can be consistent? And is the crack growing? If so, give me a call. I'll reach out to the builder. If not, then, you know, you understand what I'm trying to tell you. So the house will tell part of the story itself. And a lot of times it just goes back to the lack of knowledge that I mentioned before. The experience. And this is one thing I'm really big on. We try so hard in the way that we treat people to be respectful to them and show them that we care about them. And we want every experience with us to be positive. For you guys, I know you don't want your builders, your project manager, your sales staff. If you've got an on-site model and they ride by that house and they see something, the very next place they're going is to that on-site model, and they're going to go in there and talk to the salespeople, and that's a distraction. Or they're going to ride around and find the builder or project manager, and they're going to, you know, they're going to talk to him. Well, those are distractions, and nobody really needs those. So if we could partner and help on that experience, and we can be an asset to you guys and to the client, that's why we go to the trouble of setting the expectations that we do. You know, and the other thing too is the more pleasant experiences they have, they're going to tell their friends and their sphere of influence, and you're going to get referrals for new builds in that neighborhood. The other thing too is a happy client on the back end is so much easier to deal with than one that's unhappy. You get fewer maintenance and warranty requests because, you know, they feel involved, they feel heard. And then just as important is the employee experience. You know, if your salesperson sitting in that on-site model every day getting complaints, eventually they're going to absorb those complaints and become a little negative themselves. And, you know, good employees are too hard to find. If we can increase that employee satisfaction, let them have a sense of pride and accomplishment in helping someone build their home. Because I'm a firm believer that building that house should not be a headache. It should be a pleasurable experience. And of course, there's going to be bumps along the way, but it's how we communicate that and how we partner with that client to make these things happen that are important, in my opinion. So I blew through that pretty quick, but the last thing I want to say is I would absolutely love the opportunity to come to some of you guys' sales meeting with your sales staff and talk about that code program and common problems that we see, things that we can do together to build that bridge. You know, at the end of the day, and I heard Trina say, learn more, earn more. It gives us better referrals, and we have new construction agents that will refer us when clients ask because, you know, we've stepped in with clients who are going to walk away and explain things to them. We will go over and beyond for that client. That's who's paying us. That's who we work for. But I see a tremendous opportunity in the building community for us to really educate your sales staff and your builders and your team leaders, your management, to realize we're not just there to make your life miserable, even though sometimes I'm sure it seems like it. You know, we want to be a good partner to everybody involved. Taylor, I see you there, and I'm going to open up this QA stuff. All right, so.
Dave, you
Hi,
there?
Nima. I am, sir.
Perfect. So typically, if it's all right with you, I'll ask you the question, and we'll kind of elaborate on each one, if that's cool.
All right.
So one of our attendees asked, do you have access to appraisal level lender required repairs? And can you point those in your inspection report?
We try to stay as far away from the appraisal as we can. The other thing too, and you guys know this, every lender has their own overlays on things that are going to be required. Now, if it's FHA or a HUD-backed loan, FHA, VA, USDA, that type thing, we can address those, and we typically do in our reports, regardless of whether we know it's that type of loan or not. But sometimes, you know, just to give you an example, the appraiser is there when we're there, especially on new construction because we're working on tight timelines. What we do in that case is we don't even talk to them because we don't want to affect their appraisal. And if we tell them something's wrong, you know, it could affect their appraisal. So we don't want any involvement with that whatsoever. But again, you know, we're not familiar with all the different lenders' overlays, and who knows what an underwriter is going to say sometimes. So, you know, but like I say, if it's a HUD-backed loan, we'll typically add those in the report, yes.
Excellent, excellent. We've got one that says, regarding septic tank installations, how far should it be from the home structure?
You know, I've seen them within 5 foot, and I've seen them 100 foot away. That basically is going to boil down to what that DHEC permit says, which is going to be property dependent. Okay. I encourage everybody on new construction to go to DHEC and get a copy of that permit for the septic tank so that they know where that tank is, how far away it is, where the leach field, drain fields are. And I tell them up front, look, you know, there's going to be 2 drawings on the right side of the paper, and it's going to look like your 3rd grader did it because they're doing it by pencil. But that's one of the most important documents they can get in a new build.
Excellent. Excellent. I feel like this is a great question here, Dave. When a buyer asks you to inspect the home, how do you address the issue of radon and radon testing?
Typically, we're going to ask what county is it in. I'm sure most of you know, since roughly late 2007, 2008, depending on when the permit was pulled, Greenville County has required a passive radon mitigation system. So here's what I tell people about radon. When they ask, I'm going to say, look, I always recommend a radon test. And the simple reason why is it's the second leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States. If you want reassurance that the county or that your home is safe, a radon test is really the only way to do it. Now, in terms of new construction, Greenville County requires it. Some builders are using it in Spartanburg County or Anderson County because it's just a normal part of their plan. But there's no real way to know until you get to that specific house. So I would recommend it. It's only $125. If the radon level tests high, then generally the builder is willing to do a mitigation system, which consists of a fan in the attic. But that would be between you, your realtor, and the builder. I can't guarantee that. But we are in a high area of radon concentration. It is a problem in this area. So, you know, if it's something that you want to know, then by all means do it. You know, and if need to, I'll give them some links so that they can go and read about it and look it up. The other thing I also tell them is don't ask me to explain radon, because one of my inspectors and I did 2 brand new houses in the same subdivision, literally 50 feet apart. One house, the same 48-hour period. We both did them at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. One house was 0.4, the other one was 18.2.
Wow.
So I cannot explain to you why radon is where it is, or, you know, it's the most fickle thing I've ever seen. But, you know, if it's a concern and if you're asking the question, it probably is, then I would recommend it. But the other part that I need you to understand as a buyer is we have to communicate with that builder so that no one goes in that home during those 48 hours. If they do go in the home, they know to shut the door, which subs are really bad about.
Okay, perfect. How about, of all the things that you inspect, what part of them is not already being inspected by the city or the county?
Well, here's what I tell folks with regards to what the salespeople tell them. All right, so yes, the builder's absolutely right. They're going to have a county inspector come out. The county inspector typically is going to spend 15 to 30 minutes there. You know, there's so much construction in this area. They don't have enough folks. They don't have enough time. And they're going to look at independent systems. They're going to check a GFCI through and turn everything on and run it for the period of times that we are. We're going to be there 2 hours or so. It's not as invasive. It's not as inclusive. It's not as well-rounded, because not only do we look at how these individual systems operate, we're looking at what we call a balanced inspection. That is, how does everything work together? It's more of a holistic approach than what the county does. And then the other thing that I tell them, they'll go, well, then the builder told me they had their own inspector. And I'll be like, yeah, they do. And typically it's a company called 2M or a company called Quality. And those guys are not licensed home inspectors. They're coming out doing a fit and finish inspection. They're looking at the pretty stuff. And, you know, that's typically what they're doing. And it's kind of part of a QA process for the builder. So our inspection is much more thorough. And, you know, just like the one we did yesterday, the dryer vent, it also had a gas vent that comes out right by the intake for the hot water heater that was also gas. So the county misses stuff on a regular basis, and I have to think it's because they're overworked. And, you know, we're going to miss stuff too. But the odds are that we're not going to miss big things like that. On the one yesterday, the flashing that was missing at the sidewalls where you could see the house wrap, I was just really amazed. So that's typically what I tell them. And then the response we get back from the builders, let's take it another step, is, well, the county said it's fine, so I don't have to fix it. Well, and that may be the case. And I used to have a really good relationship with Merck at the county, and I would call him and go, Merck, got a problem. Builder's not wanting to fix it, and here's the issue. It's really tough to get the county to go back and say they did something wrong. But, you know, on occasion they have. I've also seen the county, and I will never, ever forget this house. There was no gas meter, no running water, no appliances, no thermostats. And I watched the county give the builder a CO so they could close the next morning.
Wow. Wow. I don't know what to say about that one.
Well, and you know that I didn't either. And, you know, but I share those stories with clients, and I mean, I can give you, I'm not going to, because it would identify the builder. But I could give you the address of the house, and I did that inspection about 4 years ago. So it's just always stuck in my mind.
Of course. Of course. I guess that the saying is true. There's flaws in every system.
Absolutely.
Here's a good one. Do you recommend sellers to do an inspection before they put their house on the market, or just after?
You know, it's funny you bring that up, because if you, I just ordered some yard signs last night, and remember I told you that I'm not a realtor, so why would I need a yard sign? I've just started a website called Pre-Inspect at Greenville. I've long realized, but never been able to figure out, if I did every home inspection in the upstate, I could still only have 50% of that real estate transaction, right? So what can I do to get seller business? So I recently had this idea, and I've brought it to fruition. If you go to preinspectatgreenville.com, we're going to start a program, and I haven't announced it public. Well, I guess I have. I just publicly announced it. Basically, the way this thing is going to work is, if you get your home pre-inspected, the day we inspect it, we're going to put a yard sign out front that says "For Sale Soon," preinspectatgreenville.com. And we're going to have a text short code and a keyword where they can text us. And what they can do with that is they can buy a report for $24.95. Now, the seller's going to have to pay for us to do the inspection, because I've got inspectors that want to make money, and I've got to pay for these websites and stuff. But that $24.95 ensures also that we're not just giving out reports to every Tom, Dick, and Harry that drives by that sign. They got a little skin in the game. So it kind of qualifies that person. And then what we're going to do with the person who buys those reports or contacts us about the house, whomever that agent is that's going to be listing the house, we're going to provide that lead to them in advance. So they'll be getting free buyer leads off of it. And my thinking there is, if you're referring them to us, you're getting some buyer leads. Some of them may buy that, one of them may buy that house, and they may not. But, you know, if you get 5, 6, 7 leads a house, then, you know, that's a value that we're bringing to that listing agent. The flip side of that is, once you go under contract, you have to have licensed contractors make repairs. Well, if that seller gets our report, you know, some of the things they can probably do themselves. It prevents inspection surprises, gives them a list of things they need to do to get the home ready to sell. And typically the ones that we've done, we have seen the home sell faster, and even for a little more money, because as buyers come in, they're seeing that these things are already done. So you have easier repair negotiations. So, you know, there's just benefits for everybody, the buyer's agent, the seller's agent, the seller. And I just think it's a good way to build our client base, if you will, because we get to work with these folks. So we get an inspection out of it, and hopefully we'll do the inspection on the home they buy.
Dave,
Does that answer the question?
I think that answered it great. I have a feeling you're going to get several phone calls from some realtors that are currently on this call right now.
I hope so.
Let's see. Here's a great question because we get this question at the HBA. In an older home that were built to code when constructed, how do you handle items that are now required as code?
Well, I see that question is from Bruce Bachtel, and Bruce, of course, Taylor's the one that invited me here today. So thank you, my friend Bruce. That's a sticky subject, and I'll tell you, because we don't inspect the code, remember? But here's what all my inspectors are trained to do. If there's been major renovations or additions to that house, typically, if you're doing that kind of work, a permit should be pulled. And if you pull a permit, the county is going to require you to bring it up to the then current code of when that work was done. So probably the most common issue here is with GFCI outlets. House built in 1968, they renovated the kitchen in 1982 or 2008. That kitchen's got to have GFCI. And we're going to call that out, that because of, you know, renovations, repairs, or especially on flipped homes, you know, that they should be there. Now, there's another common issue too that comes down to three-prong outlets in an older home. So what we do is we refer to National Electric Code, or NFPA 70. And that basically says that the seller would have three options. One, they can replace the two-prong outlets with three-prong, which honestly, I mean, think about everything you have nowadays, it's three-prong. That just doesn't make sense to me. The other thing they can do is rewire the house and ground everything. Well, from a seller's perspective, you know, the average 1,500, 2,000 square foot house is going to cost you $8 to $10 grand to rewire that house. Seller's not going to do it. So the third option is what most people choose, and that's just that you label the outlets ungrounded, and doing so then makes it code compliant. So we do consider when the house was built, when the additions or renovations were done, and we incorporate that into our report. And one of the differences in us and other inspectors is I know code and everything pretty well, and most inspectors don't. So that's why we're able to say things like that. It's because we know it and we understand it.
Okay, great. While we're on the topic of electrical, we've got a question here from Miss Nema. While testing electrical outlets, why do inspectors just not use new light bulbs to see whether it's working or not, rather than ask the sellers to get a licensed electrician? I guess the real question here is, why would the inspector not try to put a new light bulb in a outlet to see if it's working?
Well, first of all, we don't carry light bulbs. We're not going to start, and we're not required to do that. Secondly, we don't touch people's personal property, and that fixture is a personal property. Guarantee you there'd be somebody that'd say, we tore it up, we broke it. So we're not going to do it. You know, my advice would be, and you're going to need this for the appraiser anyway, is make sure, and this goes out to all the seller agents, that we send a notification of inspection. Have bulbs and everything. It just makes it easier. You know, and we're not going to touch people's personal property. I'll give you a prime example. Nick Sabatine at GGAR may not like me sharing this story, but it's true. Down in Simpsonville about a year ago, I get a phone call from a lady that one of my inspectors stole $30,000 in jewelry. Well, this particular inspector, if you knew her, if they had left a distributor cap laying around, she might would have looked at it and thought about it. But she's got no use for jewelry. It's just not her thing. So I called her and I immediately said, look, I'm going to go do your 1 p.m. inspection. You go to Greenville County Sheriff's Office. You have your fingerprints taken. This lady's called the Sheriff's Office. I want you to go down there and get ruled out because I know you didn't take this stuff. So she did that. And then I immediately called my real estate broker because we're all licensed realtors. And then I called Nick at GGAR. And I said, hey, this is going on. I just want you to know in case you hear anything about it. So when I called Nick, Nick said, wait a minute, let me give you a call back, Dave. So, I don't know, maybe 2, 3, 4 hours later, Nick called me back and he said, this home's in Simpsonville, right? I said, yes, sir. He said, and she stole $30,000 worth of jewelry that was in a sock drawer, rolled up in a sock in the very back of the drawer. And I said, yes, sir. He said, we had the exact same complaint on an appraiser last year from the exact same address.
Wow.
So we do not touch personal property, period. And we're not going to for that reason. But again, that, you know, that's so easy to fix. Just have them put a light bulb in there. Odds are they got one in their house anyway. The other thing, Nima, that I want you to know is we don't recommend a licensed electrician to replace a light bulb. In fact, very seldom do we call out any particular trade. And the reason for that is it's kind of common sense. You know, a handyman or a DIY can go in there and replace a light bulb. You don't need a licensed electrician for that. To me, that's a CYOA statement by an inspector who's not willing to take accountability for his work. And I demand my guys take accountability. If you say it, you put a picture in there and prove it. If you don't have a picture of it, you don't say it. And if you need to say it and don't have a picture, you go back and take one. And, you know, to me, it's just common sense. You don't need a licensed electrician to replace a light bulb. That's crazy.
I love it. I love it. Hey, one last question and we'll kind of wrap this up. We've got somebody on here asking, says, clarify for me, I've had this happen a couple of times. If the GFCI isn't grounded, it's just a regular outlet. And if the GFCI, and if it is a GFCI and it's not grounded, then the seller has to ground it.
Hello, Sherry Tate. No, that's not true, actually. Again, it's a little complicated, but let's say you have an ungrounded electrical system in a house, but your seller or your client has put GFCI in the kitchen and the bath. When we plug in, we're going to see it's ungrounded. And odds are, for liability reasons, just because of the world we live in, we're going to recommend fixing it. But here's the real truth and skinny on that. It doesn't have to be grounded for that GFCI to work. If that GFCI gets wet, it's going to break the outlet rather than tripping it. They're designed so that if water gets in them, that outlet will break. The difference there is you're going to need a licensed electrician then, unless you're a handy homeowner, because you can't just push the button to reset it. You're going to actually have to replace that GFCI outlet.
Okay.
But when we go to push our button to trip that outlet, it's never going to trip because there's not a ground reference for it. So we're going to report that it did not trip. But we're also not going to throw water on it and damage it to see if it works. So, and that's the difference, frankly, and that I've worked very hard to bring to this home inspection world, is knowing that stuff and being able to answer those questions. And I have two good friends. One's a licensed electrician and plumber, and one's an HVAC guy. And if I don't know, or if my inspector doesn't know, then we call them and we find out to verify. And as you can tell, I got a pretty big head, but I can't know but so much. And we just try to keep it simple. I mean, you know, there's no reason in making this harder than it has to be.
Yep, I fully agree. Dave, I first want to say thank you for all of your time today. The information you've given us has been incredible. I think we're going to have some Dave-isms after this that I think everybody's going to catch on. I think the one that stuck with me was we don't carry light bulbs and we're not going to start. I think that's going to stick in my head now. So every time I think of you, I will think of the light bulb comment. I love that. But everybody that's on the call, listen, Dave's got his information up. If you have any questions, and if you want to ask anything else, please reach out to Dave or reach out to us at the HBA. We can get them straight to Dave and make sure we get you an answer on it. Again, Dave, from me, I really appreciate your time. We're going to roll over to Michael real quick. Michael is in charge of all of our government affairs through the HBA. Hear a couple words from him, and then I'm going to have Trina kind of wrap everything up. But from me, I appreciate everybody joining today, and I look forward to seeing all of y'all next week, or the next September 10th, I believe it is. Michael, go ahead.
Good morning, Taylor. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm just going to give you a quick update on a couple of governmental items. First off, government affairs is one of those behind the scenes things that we do for the entire industry. Obviously, it's something that we consider a member benefit, and the way that we try to make it that is to communicate with you information that the rest of the industry might not get. But we do that work at all three levels of government, and what we have is a federation of associations that work together and work very well together and cooperate together to keep an eye on government and report to you what's going on, and to lobby government to take care of your industry. And so we do that at three levels. The federal level is obviously the National Association of Home Builders. The state level is the Home Builders Association of South Carolina. And of course, we're doing the work here at the local level with the Home Builders Association of Greenville. And I'll reference back to what Dave talked about a minute ago with Radon. That is an example of one of the ways that we've worked for the interest of the industry and for consumers. And it actually goes back a good way. The first appendix for radon in a building code in South Carolina was the IRC in 2000. And Greenville County adopted that radon appendix with the 2000 code, which I think was adopted in South Carolina in 2003. Yeah, they're off by a couple of years. And the HBA worked with the county, and it was Greenville County that adopted that radon appendix, worked with the county to develop a solution that the code officials would approve that is very affordable. And it's an example for other areas that are needing to deal with radon. And then if, even with that passive, what's called a passive radon system, even if the radon tests high, there's another mechanical change that can be put onto that system. It's a fan that goes at the top of the pipe that pulls the radon out from the foundation up through the roof to lower the radon exposure. So it's only required in Greenville County, not by the cities, although almost all builders put them in all throughout the county and even in the neighboring counties. So that's a great example of where we worked to solve a problem and quite a while ago. At the federal level, we have presidential elections coming up. If you were watching TV last night, you heard all about it. Lumber prices have been a big issue, so we're working on that pretty hard. At the state level, our focus has been on housing attainability, and actually we've been doing a series of conferences that are geared towards educating elected officials and consumers about why housing is expensive and difficult to access. And in fact, the last session of that is this afternoon. And then here at the local level, we're working on affordability as well. Recently, the city of Easley proposed an impact fee. They did it without a public hearing, which I think was really just a COVID-related oversight. And we asked them to send it back to Planning Commission for a public hearing, which is what they did. So we'll be weighing in on that next month. In the city of Greenville, there are 3 different ordinances that we're working on right now. An ordinance related to the construction of townhomes, an ordinance related to infill building in existing neighborhoods, and then a tree ordinance that is in draft form now that we're reviewing. Greenville County has been implementing for the last couple of years a section of their land development regs called Section 3.1, which in our opinion effectively zone the unzoned areas, or at least properties in the unzoned areas. And we've been actively opposing that. And then just one more thing, over in Anderson County, they had to suspend all permitting and inspections earlier this month because quite a few of their staff tested positive for coronavirus and they got sick. We understand they're back at work, but they're really behind, as you would expect, but they're working pretty hard to get caught up. And I'm heading over there next week to talk with the Anderson HBA, and the conversation is going to be along the lines of, let's talk with Anderson County about what do you need so that you can work more virtually. What kind of tools do you need so we know how to communicate with county council and get the funding for those things. So that's what I've got, Taylor. That's what we're working on. And so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining the Zoom briefing.
All right, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Dave. We had great questions from the audience, so thank you for that participation. Again, our motto is learn more, earn more, and I think today was a great example of that. So if you want more information about joining the HBA, the Sales and Marketing Council, or the Professional Women in Building, please feel free to call me, call up here to the HBA, talk to Michael, Taylor, Stacy. We're all here to help. Again, and our next opportunity to learn a little bit more is Appraisal 101, sorry. That is September 10th. We will send out the link, invite everybody to join us. I mean, again, really great information. And then we'll have even more events coming up, and hopefully soon, one of these days, we can get back to in-person networking and just kind of getting to know each other as industry professionals. So thanks, guys. We appreciate it. And if you have any other questions, just let us know. Have a great morning.